The phone call came on a Tuesday. Stephen Miller sat alone in his dimly lit apartment. The blue glow of the television screen washed over his face.
A phone call from mate at home, Stephen. It's Dad. He's gone. A heart attack. Sudden. Unexpected.
Stephen's world tilted. This was his father, the man who had taught him how to be a man. And now, he was gone. The drive was a blur. Stephen's Mustang ate up the miles. Ellijay hadn't changed much. The same quaint downtown, the same general store. He drove straight to his father's house, a modest cabin. May was waiting for him. They embraced, a silent exchange of sorrow and shared history. Over the next few days, Stephen moved through the motions of mourning. But beneath the surface of grief, a disquiet rippled. His father's death was sudden, unexpected. The whispers started subtly, veiled comments from neighbors, the way May avoided his questions.
You know, Stephen, your dad wasn't himself lately. Something was off.
The funeral was a somber affair. Stephen felt their gazes. After the service, people he barely recognized offered condolences. Back at the cabin, Stephen tried to broach the subject that gnawed at his heart.
What was Dad like these past few months? Dale mentioned he was different.
The next morning, Stephen found himself drawn back to the general store.
Jeremy, he was always a good man, your father. But these last few months, he came in here, bought himself a whole mess of camping gear.
Did he say anything else?
Anything about why he was going? Not a word. Just that he needed some time alone. Look, son, I don't want to worry you, but there's been talk. Folks going missing in those woods.
Back at the cabin, Stephen tried to piece together the puzzle of his father's final days. He searched his father's belongings, finding nothing but old photographs and fishing lures. Then he remembered the shed. The lock was old, easily picked with a paperclip. Inside, he found a long, narrow wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of crimson velvet, lay a katana. The weight of the katana felt both familiar and alien in Stephen's hands. He spent hours that day researching, the internet his only companion. A knock on the door startled him. A woman stood on the porch.
Stephen Miller, Emily Lawson, Ellijay Times. I'd like to ask you some questions about your father.
Stephen's initial thought was to shut the door in her face. Emily insisted.
Your father's death, the circumstances surrounding it. The whispers in this town suggest it wasn't natural causes.
My father died of a heart attack. The doctor confirmed it.
And the camping gear? The solo trip to Blood Mountain? Hikers have gone missing in those woods, Mr. Miller.
Over cups of lukewarm coffee, Stephen told Emily everything. Emily spoke.
My father, the sheriff, he's a good man, but he's also stubborn, set in his ways.
My father was involved in something dark. And I think this sword is the key to understanding what happened to him. Then we need to find out what that something is, and we need to do it carefully.
Later that day, Stephen Miller was confronted by Sheriff Daniel Lawson. The sheriff insisted that Stephen abandon his investigation, but the former Navy SEAL was determined to answer unanswered questions about his father's death. That evening, when he went back to his dad's cabin, Stephen's sister was waiting for him. She said she had something important to talk to him about. "Stephen," May asked, "how is your heart? Your salvation? What are you doing Sunday? Would you come with me to service at our old church in the valley?" Stephen replied deliberately, "Why? My heart is okay, I guess." May was persistent. "Just come with me Sunday, please." Stephen did not give her a definite answer. May let it go for now. The next day in his investigation, Stephen met the Whisperer, Alex Mercer, a shadowy informant who revealed the existence of an ancient cult in Ellijay obsessed with immortality through dark rituals and sacrifices. The whisperer provided cryptic clues that led Stephen and Emily to investigate further. As Stephen and Emily continued their investigation, they found themselves under constant surveillance by unseen eyes, heightening their sense of danger. The opulent mansion atop the hill emerged as a central location in the mystery. The following morning, investigating further, Stephen and May visited the old sheriff's office, which was a testament to a bygone era. Emily spoke.
My great-grandfather, Elias Lawson, was the first sheriff of Ellijay.
She murmured, pulling out a thick, leather-bound journal.
He was obsessed with local lore, especially the darker tales, stories of disappearances, strange rituals, whispers of something ancient and evil lurked in the mountains.
Stephen and Emily spent the next few days poring over Elias's old journal. Elias wrote of a group he called the Order of the Serpent, a name whispered in hushed tones by the town's oldest residents. One entry, dated 1888, sent a shiver down Stephen's spine. They gathered under the ancient oak, Elias had written, their rituals fueled by blood and sacrifice. They believed it would grant them eternal life. Stephen discovered that his father Jeremy was entangled in the cult's activities, and in his final days was consumed by a desperate attempt to break free from its grasp. As dusk settled over Ellijay, Stephen and Emily made their way toward the ancient oak. The tree loomed before them, its branches reaching out like skeletal fingers.
There,
Emily whispered, pointing to a clearing beneath the oak's sprawling canopy. Faint markings, almost invisible in the fading light, formed a circle around the base of the tree. A figure emerged from the shadows, Vivian Hawthorne, her features obscured by the darkness. As she stepped into the moonlight that filtered through the leaves, Stephen's breath caught in his throat. It was the woman from the mansion on the hill. Elderly, her face a mask of wrinkles, her eyes glittering with an unsettling intensity. She wore a long, flowing black gown, a silver serpent pendant hanging from her neck.
You should not be here. This is sacred ground. Turn back now while you still can.
Stephen stood his ground.
We know about the Order of the Serpent. We know what you're doing here.
The woman's lips curled into a chilling smile.
Ah, so the prodigal son returns, and he brings with him the sheriff's whelp. How quaint.
She took a step closer. The serpent pendant swung like a pendulum.
You believe you understand things, boy. But you know nothing. This town, this land, it holds secrets older than time itself. Secrets that will remain buried, even if it means burying you with them.
The woman's threat hung in the air, a heavy presence beneath the ancient oak. Stephen's instincts, honed by years of training, screamed at him to run. He grabbed Emily's hand, pulled her away from the clearing, away from the woman with the serpent pendant and the darkness that clung to her like a shroud.
we have to lose her.
Stephen and Emily ran through the woods, their lungs burning. The sound of their own breath echoed in their ears. The woman's laughter, cold and sharp as shattered glass, followed them, urging them onward. Branches whipped at their faces, tore at their clothes, but they didn't dare slow down.
This way.
Emily said, pulling Stephen towards a narrow, overgrown path. They scrambled down a steep embankment, the ground crumbling beneath their feet. The roar of the Ellijay River filled the air, a welcome sound in the otherwise oppressive silence. They waded into the icy water, the current tugging at their legs, threatening to sweep them away. Stephen could feel the coldness seeping through his clothes, numbing his skin. But he pressed on, driven by adrenaline and the desperate hope of escaping the darkness that pursued them. Sheriff Daniel Lawson paced his office, his brow creased with worry. Emily's disappearance had thrown the town into a frenzy. Search parties scoured the woods, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like fireflies in the night. He knew in his gut that this was no ordinary missing persons case. Emily was his daughter, but she was also a good reporter, her instincts as sharp as her tongue. She had been onto something, he knew it. Something that had gotten her into trouble, something that had gotten her taken.
I dismissed her concerns about the disappearances, the whispered of a cult operating in the shadows. I told her it was just local folklore, nothing to worry her pretty little head about.
He slammed his fist on his desk, frustration warring with fear. He had been sheriff for over 20 years, had seen his fair share of darkness. But this felt different. This felt ancient, insidious, like a cancer eating away at the heart of his town. A knock on the door startled him. It was Deputy Hayes, his young, eager deputy.
What is it, Hayes?
"Sheriff, we have something," Hayes said, his voice tight with urgency. "Found these boots by the riverbank. Looks like they belong to your daughter." He held up a pair of muddy hiking boots, Emily's boots. Daniel's blood ran cold. They had evaded their pursuers, but the ordeal had taken its toll. Stephen and Emily found shelter in an abandoned hunting cabin. As they huddled around a makeshift fire, Emily explained to Stephen about the Order of the Serpent.
"There's more," Emily said, her voice barely a whisper. "My great-grandfather believed they used tunnels beneath the town for their rituals."
She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket.
"I found this tucked away in his journal, a map. I think it shows the location of one of the tunnel entrances."
The entrance to the tunnel was concealed behind a thicket of overgrown vines and tangled roots. Armed with only a flashlight and a growing sense of dread, Stephen and Emily entered the darkness. The air inside the tunnel was thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something ancient and vaguely metallic. The walls were rough-hewn stone, the ceiling low enough in places that they had to duck their heads.
"A sacrifice,"
Emily whispered, her voice trembled with horror. Stephen felt a surge of rage. He had seen enough death, enough sacrifices during his time in the Navy. He wasn't about to stand by and watch innocent blood be spilled in the name of some twisted immortality ritual. He drew the katana, its blade gleaming dully in the torchlight. "Get ready,"
he whispered to Emily, his voice cold and hard.
"It's time to end this."
The cavern pulsed with a dreadful energy. Stephen felt it thrumming in his bones, a symphony of fear and anticipation. He gripped the katana, its familiar weight a comfort. Emily, her face pale but resolute, clutched a heavy iron torch she'd grabbed from the cabin and lit. It wasn't much, but it was something. He caught her eye, a silent question passing between them. There was no plan, only the reckless certainty that doing nothing was not an option. Not now, not when a life hung in the balance. He nodded towards the shadowed figures, their attention focused on the chanting-robed man at the altar. A diversion. It was their only chance. With a burst of speed that belied the chill in his limbs, Stephen surged forward. The element of surprise was their only weapon. He moved like a phantom, years of training kicking in, years spent honing his body into a weapon. The first robed figure crumpled with a muffled cry, the katana a whisper of death in the cavern's oppressive stillness. Emily was right behind him, her own movements fueled by adrenaline and fear. The candlestick arced through the air, connecting with a sickening thud against a hooded skull. The chanting faltered, replaced by gasps of surprise and the clanging of metal against stone. Chaos erupted in the cavern. The robed figures, their ritual interrupted, turned towards their attackers, their initial surprise giving way to fury. Stephen, his senses on high alert, deflected a blow from a ceremonial dagger. The metal sang as it slid against the katana's blade. He fought with the cold precision of a soldier, each movement calculated, each strike aimed to disable, not to kill. These were not soldiers, he reminded himself. These were people, corrupted by a darkness they barely understood. But even as the thought crossed his mind, he knew he couldn't afford mercy. Not while Emily was in danger.
Emily fought with a ferocity that surprised him. Her fear had transformed into a primal rage, the candlestick a blur of motion as she defended herself against the onslaught. He caught glimpses of her face in the flickering torchlight. Determined, fearless, her green eyes blazed with a fire that mirrored his own. They were outnumbered, outmatched, but not out of hope. Not yet. As long as they had each other's backs, as long as they fought side by side, they had a chance.
The cavern echoed with the clang of metal, the thud of bodies hitting the stone floor. Stephen, his breath ragged, his muscles screaming for respite, felt a surge of desperate hope. They were holding their own against all odds. But it was a losing battle. They couldn't keep this up forever.
Enough!
The robed figures parted, creating a path to the altar. The woman from the woods, the matriarch, stood there, her serpent pendant gleaming in the torchlight. Her eyes, like chips of ice, settled on Stephen.
You dare defile this sacred place. You dare interfere with our rituals, our destiny.
Stephen stood tall, katana unwavering.
Your destiny ends here. Your reign of fear, your promises of immortality, they die tonight.
The matriarch laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the cavern.
Foolish boy, foolishness. You think you can stop what you do not understand? The power we wield is beyond your comprehension.
She gestured towards the bound figure on the altar.
This sacrifice, it was to be your father's salvation.
Stephen froze, his blood turning to ice. His father, a sacrifice? It couldn't be true.
He realized the error of his ways. He volunteered for the ritual to protect this town from darkness.
Stephen's mind reeled. His father's face, etched with pain, flashed before his eyes. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and opened them with resolve. He would honor his father's memory by ending this cycle of fear and death. The first rays of dawn in the cavern's gloom, painting the walls with hues of gold and rose. The matriarch lay on the cold stone floor, her serpent pendant shattered, her reign of terror finally at an end. The spell was broken. The darkness that had clouded their minds was lifting, revealing the true cost of their pursuit of immortality. Stephen leaned against the altar, and his body battered but his spirit unbroken, watched as Emily tended to the freed captive. As they emerged from the tunnel, blinking in the bright morning light, the town of Ellijay stretched before them, bathed in the promise of a new day. Later in the day, Stephen and Emily deciphered the cryptic symbols and unlocked the secrets of an ancient artifact connected to this cult. They realized they were at the heart of a battle between light and darkness, good and evil. In the aftermath of the battle, the people of Ellijay emerged from the shadows. There was jubilation and newfound hope and liberation. Stephen reflected on his journey, his father's legacy, and his renewed faith. From that day on, Stephen embraced his role as a protector of Ellijay's secrets, vowing to guard the town forevermore. He decided to stay in Ellijay to rebuild his life and relationships with May George, his sister, and Emily Lawson. With this ordeal behind them, the community came together to celebrate their new freedom and unity, marking the beginning of a new chapter in Ellijay's history, where the light of truth shined bright again. In the process, Stephen found his redemption and became a leader in the local church in the valley. This was a short preview of the upcoming novel by David Erickson, Ellijay's Redemption, soon to be released on Amazon and Kindle.